environmental movement in Nepal. And to do this, I'm going to focus on Nisgaard environmental movement as I see it. I don't claim that my opinion or my impressions are complete, but there may be lots of other opinions and impressions as well. And the more, the better. I welcome all those comments and energies. Having said that, first I want to get the main things out of the way, which is that I want to tell you about the take-home messages you should take after my talk. So I'm going to go to the conclusion of my talk first so that you don't get confused when I start talking all over the field. So let me just minimize the video and let's go to the next slide. Okay, Saraswati, I'm getting some problems in going to the next slide.
You can, sir, you.
Yeah, no?
Okay, sorry, Rathi. Sorry.
Okay, I got the next slide. Okay, here is the take-home message I want all of you to take at the end of my presentation. My presentation is approximately 20 minutes for a text portion and about 20 minutes more for the visual portion. I want to get the text portion away, and among the text portion also, I want to get the main take-home message, the Nisgaard conclusion first. So I'm sorry I misspelled Nisgaard right here, and I'm thankful to Saraswati for showing this one. So here, what are the elements of a successful environment movement? And this is based not only on Nisgaard movement, but also based on other successful environment movements. In particular, I'll be talking about the movement in the USA by Carson and the movement of Chipko Andolan in India. So all of them share certain commonalities, and these are some of the things. First, we got to have knowledge and education of all the aspects. That's extremely important. We are very fortunate to have lots of people talking about that. The knowledge and education can come from journal articles, popular articles, TV, YouTube, all kinds of social networks, but it can also come from talking with your friends, relatives, sisters, brothers, etc. That's very important. However, knowledge and education is rarely enough to start a movement. Second, people must have love for the environment, love for the nature. They should identify nature and this as their own, not as an enemy and not as something removed from the society. That's also quite important. So just learning about environment issues, nature issues at a far distance is not enough. So both 1 and 2 are very important. And then we have the third one is that we must learn to appreciate all the good things that environment do for us. So here we have all kinds of knowledge from people involved in environment, both the academics, the media, the professors, etc. And also all the lectures we hear about this and that good things environment do. Now, all the good things that environment do for us, forestry, wildlife, etc., we call that instrumental love. Instrumental love in Nepali would be called matlabi love. So we learned that this thing will do this and this is a good thing, so we want to save the environment. However, to save the environment, it is not enough to find out how it helps us. There are lots of things we know in the environment. We don't know how they help us, or we don't know how they are related. Take, for example, snow leopard. Yes, the snow leopards are very beautiful, etc., but they have no meaning, no relation to our everyday life. So the question is, are we only going to save things about the environment which are concerned with? No, that's not enough. So 1, 2, 3, very important, still not enough. What is most important is number 4, we must learn to cherish the environment for its intrinsic right to exist and thrive. The word intrinsic means that forest, trees, environment, nature has a right to exist, and we respect that right to exist, just like we respect our mothers and babies. We know that initially mothers take care of us by giving us milk, food, protection against fathers, etc. And there are all kinds of good things mothers do. But there will come a time when mothers get very old, they get sick, and sometimes they will lose their memory and can't even recognize us. So the question is, do we abandon our mothers? Do we let them die? Do we kill them? No, we don't do that, because mothers have a right to exist on their own. Similar with babies. Babies, when they are first born, they are weak. They are crying all the time. They disturb our sleep. They shit all over the place, poop all over the place, lots of hassles. But do we abandon babies? Do we kill babies? No. We we like to cherish the babies because they have a right to live on their own. Similarly, whether it is trees that you know, forests that you know, animals that you know, nature, skies that you know, whether they whether you understand how they help us or not, they have the right to exist. Exist. So this is called intrinsic right to exist and thrive. And ultimately, when we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 together, we have a successful environment movement. When you have 1, 2, and 3, we have initial success. Sometimes it fails as well. So this is the main stuff. So the way we try to operationalize this thing is to have situation where you not only learn about trees and nature, etc., but wherever you go there, try to hug the trees. And we all are quite familiar with the current phenomena of selfies. So you can have tree plus selfie, you can have a selfie. So here's my selfie. So have you hugged a tree today? I have. So you should also do it too. Now let us now go to the crux of my talk program. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, I'm again having a little bit problem going to slides. Okay, so the main context here is the recent decision made by the Supreme Court of 5 judges around just Baragate. So that's approximately three months ago. After a long litigation, about 3 to 4 years of litigation, in which people who were supporting the environment got alarmed that up to 8,000 hectares of Bara's 15,000 hectares were going to be cut down, and when they cut down, it will be cutting down approximately 24 lakh or 2.4 million prime forest trees to build airport, which would be the largest project of Nepal, some 7 trillion rupees, kharb rupiah, or 6 to 7 billion dollars over 25 years plan. And this has been going on and off for 25 years. But lately there was some movement to push it quite fast, and government claims that they had already spent 3 billion rupees to do so, but they have not cut down the trees, but the proposal was there. So the question was, do we need to happen? And most of the government leaders, politicians, and mainstream media were only highlighting the fact that Kathmandu is overcrowded. Yes, there's no doubt about it. We need lots of tourists and planes. Yes, there's no doubt about it. So we need a second airport. Yes, we need a second one. There's no doubt about it. The question here is, do we need an airport in prime forest of Nisgarh? And here there was a lot of controversy. Most of the experts before, mostly civil engineers and aeronautical engineers, they claim that this is the only place that can happen for Nisgarh Airport. But lots of environmental people were doubting the fact, and I'll try to go into the details. But when those pros and cons argument were put forward in the media, most people could not follow the technical arguments. Everybody seemed to be right. They were top engineers and top environmentalists and top forest talking. So it was very confusing. So when this got to the court, the judges are also not environmentalists or ecologists or economists or engineers, etc. What the judges do is that, have any laws been broken? And the question here is, are there any laws related to environment that apply to Nisgarh? So there are just lots of laws, of course, were there. But one of the law is the law regarding EIA, or Environmental Impact Assessment, which is a legal requirement to any project. And that was done in the case of Supreme Court. And it is here that faults were found, copy paste were found, errors were found. And this was put before the Supreme Court judges. And Supreme Court judge brought out the people who made those EIA, questioned them, and asked them, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And they admitted they were wrong. So one glaring wrong part was that there was a lot of copy paste going on, and they had put elements from Himalayan hydroelectric dams into this Tarai project, with animals like coral and musk deer and snow leopard found in Nisgarh area, as well as hydroelectric potential found in Nisgarh area. So it was clear it was a very, very sloppy job. So, and based on the sloppy job, we could not depend on EIA, Environment Ministry, to got it right. Environment Ministry approved it under political pressure. So although the government spent so many years and so much money, all the decisions they had made over 24 years was cancelled, annulled, rendered zero. So when that happened, of course, most of the politicians, most of the timber mafia, most of the development people, most of the politicians, they were up in rage. they couldn't quite say the Supreme Court was wrong, because everybody has to follow the Supreme Court, not the king. Even the king and the president of Nepal have to follow the Supreme Court. We had an issue just about a year ago when the most powerful person, the Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. KP Oli, had to leave his seat because Supreme Court decided that what he did was wrong. So here in this case, although this was the largest project of Nepal, this also was cancelled by the 5 court justices. Now, one of the reasons why there were 5 Supreme Court judges was that there were 2 litigation. The litigation means law court, and these are called public interest litigation made by ProPublic, which has a very successful record of litigating on environmental issues, mostly urban waste issues, and they have won all the cases. And a new litigant, Mrs. Ranju Hazur Pandey, a forester, also put that since there are 2 cases on the same issue, the Supreme Court decided with a five Supreme Court judges. And one of the laws of the land is that when they make a decision, that decision is irreversible. You cannot go and impeach against it. So it stands by the rule, and you have to follow the rule. So once it happened, how did the government respond? Almost a week or 2 later, the Prime Minister went to Nizhgard and said, we are going to make it in the same place, right? So people wonder, are they going to go against Supreme Court judgment, etc.? But we know that they were trying to do something for public opinion, and then they have to follow the Supreme Court judgment, etc. And the Supreme Court has said, if you have to make the decision at Nizhgard, you have to start at ground zero, begin all over again, have an expert committee which includes all the relevant experts. So in the earlier case, they had experts from civil aviation, engineers, development experts, but they did not have adequate experts from environment, anthropology, wildlife, etc. So this time they constituted an expert committee in Shravan Branch. That's just about 2 weeks ago, maybe a week ago, and was approved by the cabinet. So see, the government is trying to do, but trying to do according to the space made available by Supreme Court. Now the question here is, yes, what is the problem? Okay, let me go. So the question here is the environment movement about Nizhgard lost? What should we do about it? And this is the issue I'm going to take about. How are we going to make our Nizhgard environment issue successful? So let me now go into the brief history of environment movement as I saw it. There may be something missing here and there. Around 2018, 2019, when the former tourism minister Ravindra Adhikari started to push for Nizhgard Airport, we got an idea that 24 lakh trees were going to be cut down through informal channels by retired forest officers. They were forest secretaries and director generals and people who had served in that particular area, and they became very, very alarmed, and they discussed among themselves informally, and they said, what shall we do? So they first thought, maybe we should go to all the policymakers, both political leaders in the government, outside the government, as well as influential people in bureaucracy, etc., and to petition the case. So a group of people, they were called eminent persons, and here are the eminent persons. They put up long list of why Nizhgard should not be deforested and why we can have airport some other place, etc. So they gave those petitions to the Prime Minister, the Tourism Minister, the Forest Minister, and then they also published that thing outside, and this was done outside the Singh Darbar, which is the seat of Nepal government right here. So they are mostly eminent people, retired forest officers. But then we also had a few people from the public sector, etc., and I'll go more into them. So right here, you will see a few people from the public sector besides technical forest officers, etc. So right here we have, for instance, Shraddha Singh Shrestha, who runs a NGO called Jain Goodall Institute and also People's Alliance for Nature. We have Mrs. Chanda Rana, who has been very active in planting trees in front of Singh Darbar, also making sure, trying to remove the invasive plants in Chitwan. And she had lots of influential people in high places, including former Prime Minister Madhu Kumar Nepal and former President Dr. Yadav and other places. So she tried to mobilize her own way. Then we have a private citizen, Dr. Annapurna Shrestha, who is a gynecologist by trade, a retired gynecologist who was deputy director of Prostitute. She has no technical interest in environment. She had very passionate interest in environment. So this is a new type of people who may not have environmental forest training, but very, very concerned. And then we have students of environment science. So he's a student of environment at Golden Gate, and we try to mobilize as many people as we could at a short notice. This is myself. We are at Singh Darbar, and here I'm going to say, try to discuss about all the broad phalanx of people, or broad group of alliance who are involved in this environment. So let's go next one. Here are the students of Golden Gate master's level environment science field at very short notice. So we have both male and female, and among them we have Mr. Govinda Govinda Pokhare was our student then. He is a sub-editor for science, prize-winning sub-editor. So he was also there, and they were not totally convinced about the merits of Nisgard environment issues, but they came in anyway. So here, the whole question was how to fight this issue. So whenever you try to show anything of the environment, you can see in the papers, they are called Vikas Birodi, dollar body, etc. So how to go around that area. So let's see how this was done. So another issue, as I said, this person, Mrs. Chanda Rana, used all of her efforts, all of her network in high circles, etc., and also put in her own money and effort to go to Nisgard, make a documentary, and came up with a slogan called "Not at the cost of 24 lakhs" to try to win the support. So she went all over the place. She got a lot of support, but not the support of politicians and mafias. And we didn't get any statement from politicians in the government, outside government, supporting environment issues. So the effort was there, but we didn't get any result then. So the question here was, now we have to go to the public. And as I said before, most of the public were only mentioning the arguments made by the politicians, saying that, okay, we need a big airport, we need large airport, we need game changer, and blah, blah stuff. And they basically ignored or avoided or minimized the great cost to environment. So here we are trying to reach out to the common people, the young people. It's staying under the people tree, trying to reach out to people who are not affected by mainstream people. So we are now in the public domain. We are young people in the public domain as well. And here now I'm going to talk about why this was necessary and how we can learn from us. So here I mentioned one thing about Raquel Carson Silent Spring, and it is quite important to learn about successful environmental movement in say United States, for instance. In United States, we call United States as a model of many things, etc. But in United States, the first Environment Protection Agency was established in 1976 only. It was not established because the government felt very good for the environment, etc. It was after long years of people's pressure to establish such environment agency. And one of the main movers was Raquel Carson. She was a lady who had done her PhD in marine biology, etc. And she had written a book called The Silent Spring. Now, since she was a marine biologist, she could understand all the science behind that. And she used to go to seashores and collect seashells, and she started noticing that there were less and less seashells coming up, and she was wondering why this happened, right? And she started digging up the metals. Now you have to remember that Raquel Carson, although she had a PhD, she was not in any government, she was not in any university, she was not in any corporation. She was a private citizen only. She never worked for anybody, and she did all of her research based on her own individual effort, etc. And then she began to see that all of this was due to DDT. DDT was used as a miracle medicine to kill pesticides and increase food production. So there was a lot of goodwill for DDT because food production increased, and the DDT industry, pesticide industry, as well as agriculture were for that stuff. So when Raquel started questioning those in articles, etc., they were trying to dehumanize it, just like we call them dollar body, anti-develop, etc. Lots of dehumanization, trying to defame her, etc. But because she continued writing, and she wrote a book called Silent Spring, in which, besides all those educational scientific arguments, she mentioned that most of our forest, most of our grassland, most of stuff, we no longer see the insects, no longer see the butterflies, no longer see trees, things which are no use to us. Suddenly they are very silent. Why? She asked. And she mentioned that's because of the side effect of DDT, which has good effect on decreasing pesticide, but basically destroyed our environment. And this was something even people who had no understanding of science, etc., who understand, because they experienced Silent Spring. That is one of my shocking experience when I was for 10 years in the United States. When I visited all kinds of forests, I suddenly noticed how silent it was. Whereas in Nepalese forest, we hear all kinds of sounds of birds and cricket, etc. It is very silent. Excuse me? Am I doing all right? Okay. So, she wrote this book in 1962. She wrote this book in 1962, and it took 14 years for public opinion, public pressure to come together to have environment protection agency, environment protection regulations. And by that way, the government started putting a large amount of money called super fund, to clean up those chemical industry polluted areas, etc. But then the people who were against that, the anti-environmental people, always saying that all of this climate and environment stuff was costing us a lot of jobs, etc. People are losing jobs. We need more lot of jobs. So they got hold of that stuff. And again, we had anti-environmental administration coming to power, including Ronald Reagan, and also most recently President Trump, who were so much against climate change, despite all the knowledge, evidence, etc., that they banned climate change department. They took the funds out of climate change and was a net negative. So in this environment, sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but we have to keep on going forever. So this is an experience from United States. That's why here we are trying to reach the common people, young people, etc. Now we started to notice that governments were really pushing really fast, and so while education was going on from government political leadership, government bureaucratic ministry, and other media answers, you will notice, and I noticed too, that the government departments and institutions are responsible for environment, like Forest Ministry, Environment Ministry, or Central Department of Environment at Tribhuvan University, or WWF, IUCN, UN. They were all very silent. They were very silent. Of course, they understand. They are all the science and technology. They are very silent, but they are politically very mum. Okay, they are very mum. As well as all the politicians. None of the politicians came forward of knees guard. And then slowly we expanded circle to academia. In academia also, lots of academia keeping it silent, but few people started to talk. And in media also, most of the media were silent, but few media started to come here. And then we went to the judge and judge, and then we noticed that this is going so fast. Maybe we got to go to the Supreme Court to stop the government, because we know that everybody has to stay under the rules, and even the king and the president and government has to stay under the rules. So we have to persuade the Supreme Court that government was breaking the rules. So we put up a Supreme Court litigation called public interest litigation about 3 years ago. And because of Corona and a lot of stuff, it was delayed for 2 to 3 years. And it was again restarted at the beginning of 2017 Baisak. And there was a decision made in just 15, etc. So while this was going on, we tried to build support in the public grassroots level. So here one major picture I want to show here is that this lady is turned around here. So we are trying to reach out for common people. Then we also try to reach out for environmental law and environmental justice. So here's a young environmental activist advocate called Sanjay Adhikari, who also took an important role in translating mostly ecological and economic arguments into legal arguments which the judges could understand. So as I said, now the first was to widen our phalanx of supporters. So we started using media, we started using social network, because those things were not available from a main point of view. So here's a YouTube message right here. In YouTube message, we got something like 127,000 views. So we're trying to reach the people who are not reachable by our mainstream like Kantipur papers, etc. Okay. And in YouTube people, there are different sorts of arguments about ecology, economics, most people knew. Arguments over engineering, most people knew. But but here is an argument about loving the environment for what it is from a humanistic point of view. So here is again Miss Shraddha Singh Shrestha of PAN giving an interview about why we should love trees and environment first on its own. And although the number of people are a little less, they are very, very passionate people, and she continued those passionate about environment for love, not just for ecology and economics. Again, we have to understand that key arguments are also important. There's Dr. Suraj Shrestha, retired forest officer, who came up with all these technical arguments of what is wrong with EIN, and also the technical arguments in petitions which were given to policymakers and ignored. But in this case, he was pointing out all the problems that were wrong with EIA. And as I just mentioned before, there's a lot of copy-paste argument. So most people could understand this was a bad document. But even in the Supreme Court, also that same argument was brought before the judges, and the judges brought out the people who designed the EIA and asked them, why do you have Ghoral and snow leopard in Bara area? And they admitted before the judge that they were in error. So this shows that the government 3 billion rupees and 25-year project was based on illegal and faulty document. That's just one of the errors. So government, basically the Supreme Court found lots and lots of such error, lots and lots of laws being broken. That is why the total laws, total argument, total distance made the government all were cancelled. Okay. As you can see here, we are trying to lobby not only ecology, environment, forest, but also an environment justice. We are talking article, etc. Okay. So here I came to my main points are over. Basically, knowledge is important, love is important, instrument love is important, but with respect to this. So this is the core of my argument. Now we have some times here. If Saraswati allows me, I'll discuss a little bit about some of the visuals remaining, or I can take some chat. But I can see there are a few chat questions. I think I'll continue try to finish the remaining 20 pictures in 5 or 10 minutes.
You can continue, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Saraswati. So as I said, government has certain media capture, etc., media, etc. We also had extra other media. So we're trying to reach the people all over the world to get support for NISGURD. And here's a signature campaign online, okay, which we put together, and we had like more than 9,000 signatures from all over the world. They may be individual people, or they may be members of organizations, etc. So we're trying to raise the issue of NISGURD at the international scale. Here is an YouTube produced by young people. Young people have their own vocabulary, own way of talking, own way of understanding, etc. And young people are very, very active nowadays in TikTok, Instagram, and vlogging. Vlogging is video logging. So this vlogger, Vicky and Banit, went to NISGURD on their motorcycle, made pictures, and talked to the people, talked to issues, and they translated the issues in ways that young people can understand. And that is very, very popular. We had almost 150,000 views for the young people. So the question, how did the young people know? It is through this media, not through Kantipur or TV or etc., but through this media. Okay. And then there are some serious journalists, online journalists like Record, which publish both sides of the equation. So Record interviewed the anti-environment people, the civil aviation people, Om Sharma, and put a short video as well. And this too got nearly 74,000 views. But again, we should not minimize the importance of technical and forestry argument as well. So here's one example of an argument, ecological and forest argument made by Professor Keshav Bhattrai, who used to be a DFO, a district forester of this particular Bara area for 10 years before he went to United States to do his PhD and become a forest officer. Geography professor. And in his university, they also had an aeronautical department, so he had access to aeronautical argument as well. So he published his documents both in Nepali and English language, but not in journal, but popular. So these are materials which people can understand, and we are very grateful to people like him. And then, as I said, in all of these people, most people get active. The people who were most silent were politicians. Okay, the politicians in Kathmandu, the big leaders, etc. Even Marukubar Nepal, who was taken in a tour of NISGURD by the parliamentary company, he was very silent, or when he spoke, he tried to become very misleading, etc. But towards the end, when the Supreme Court judgment was about to come out, we started getting some amount of public speaking by this person from Province 2 or Madhya Province, Mr. Dipendra Jha, who is the advocate general of that province, and he was sort of mobilized by Kashish Das, who is a Nepali American international naturalist environment, and Shiva Adhikari of Frankfurt. So basically, we're talking about why do we need 8,000 hectares? Why can't we have 2,000 hectares when big airports like London airport, Singapore airports, and Delhi airport had tens of millions of people going through with less than 2,000 hectares, etc. And they tried to come out with a middle path. They said, okay, if we have to have airport in Tara area, let's have it a little bit further than Nisgard in an area where there's less forest trees, etc. in Murtia area, etc. So this was nothing new. What was new was politicians started to speak. And this was happening just 2 or 3 weeks before the Supreme Court decision actually came out. Now, as I said, one of the main places where this started happening was in the informal chat group in Viber called Ban Chautari, where most of the forest officers, retired officers, with people with 40, 50, 60 years of experience start voicing the opinion. Even now it is active. So this one here is from 5th August 2022. And here, most people didn't know, but we were trying to follow what is happening. And we found out that tourism minister had constituted a new expert committee with wildlife people, other people. But the chairman was Birender Deva, was the same guy who produced the earlier argument, which was ruled as erroneous and sloppy and illegal by Supreme Court. But they at least have an expert committee, which they are trying to make Nisgard according to the legal space given by rule. So we are watching this very, very carefully, and if they make any mistake, we are going to oppose them both at technical level, at a practical level, and if necessary, even at a legal level. So one of the few prominent media that didn't believe whatever the government was saying about big development and big game changer was Nepali Times paper, and they captured this thing in a cartoon saying that this was the main interest in Nisgard was just to cut down tree by timber mafia and make lots of money from real estate, etc. So they were only interested in short-term money gain. We don't know when the money is going to come out for 6 or 7 trillion rupees or $6-7 for 25 years. So we all know about Melanchi case, where for 25 years we still don't have water. So as I said, other social network, Nisgard, this is from my Twitter network. Lots of people are active in Twitter in network that try to promote Nisgard. This is out and beyond our mainstream news media. So when the Supreme Court was about to make a decision in just around Baisak area, we tried to find out, what was the main argument. Many people had forgotten due to Corona and etc. So one of the major litigants, Mrs. Ranju Hazur Pandey, right here, and her husband Ananda, and a lawyer, they put together in Nepali all the arguments. So when the argument first started, Nisgard was supposed the second international airport after Kathmandu. But by the time we already had 2 other international airports, Pokhara and Lumbini. So this should be the 4th one. The question here is, why do you need so many airports, etc.? So this was brought to Nepal to identify. And so wherever I could find any information which is available, I tried to help it by giving it into my friend Facebook friend circle, etc. So ultimately, as I said, all of this was necessary, but since we need to stop the government, etc., there was a Supreme Court case going on for about 4 years, and it was before 5 judges right here. So I also came to spend 1 day in front of those 5 judges to hear the cases made by the environments and cases made by the defendant, etc. And it was a very good experience for me right here. And here are the main litigant, Mrs. Ranju Pandey, her husband Ananda, and this advocate Tara. And incidentally, Ranju was one of my first female students of Institute of Forestry way back when I started teaching there. So it was a very gratifying moment that my students were not only contributing in planting trees and protecting forests all over the area, and also turning around the deforestation of for 40 years into actual forest increase. But individual like Ranju Hazare actually have brought up this largest environment case in Nepal and actually won on behalf of environment. So I'm very proud of them. So I think, and this is done. Let me just, there are a few more. Okay, so as I said, we can never stop. We try to reach wherever possible. So Martin Chaudhary was another media group for serious discussion. So we brought Chanda Rana and Dr. Surasas to discuss about that. And we had students from Amrit Science College making up their own seminar on Nisgard International Airport destruction perspective. They admitted me, and here I'm trying to give my side of the story. And wherever possible, Golden Gate has a tradition of orienting new students at bachelor level and environment master's level into the 2 to 3 days orientation personal development program. And here I am trying to give a talk on Nisgard to fresh students entering Golden Gate International College, where I teach. Okay, that's there. Now, Here is a very different slide from all the slides so far. In the earlier slide, we talked about very knowledgeable, active people, lawyers and journalists and process. Now here, can an environment happen when we have neither knowledge, nor energy, nor political force, nor ecology, etc.? Can it happen with people like these women? No knowledge, no main force, no weapons or anything. Can they do it? Yes, they can do it. And this is an example of Chipko Andolan. Chipko means hugging the tree. So this was happened in early 1970s in Garhwal, which used to be a part of Nepal, but it's just west of Nepal border. And in Garhwal too, most of the main folks were working in the Tara region of India, Lucknow, Bareilly, etc. So the villagers didn't have any main folks, so very few main folks. So when the forest department gave a contract to cricket makers to cut down the trees to make cricket, etc., the contractor came to cut down trees with his machines and people, etc. These women got very alarmed. See, they are young women, old women, also very uneducated, etc. How to stop them? So they pleaded, please don't cut, please don't cut. But these people want profit, they want to cut anyway, etc. They don't have the main folks to talk to them. They didn't have any important people to discuss about the case. No ecological economic argument. They wanted trees. Why? Because they need trees to hold the soils together, to make sure they get rains properly, to make some agriculture improvement wherever their tree houses are broken, they need the trees, etc. So they value these trees very much. So what to do? So what they did was they went to hug the trees, and the hugging the trees was an idea promoted by a Gandhian activist in those areas called Sundarlal Bahuguna. So you remember that Sundarlal Bahuguna in Gandhian texts were non-violent. Non-violence means if you slap me on one side, slap me on the other side as well. But Gandhi was not so, was very clever. Even though the British government, which was the largest military power then, started to suppress this quit Indian movement in India, Gandhi always made sure, because Gandhi was trained as a lawyer in England, etc., always made sure that the media in those days, the telegraph people, the press people, the camera people were looking at their protest area, and when the British soldiers were suppressing them violently, all that pictures went back to Britain, and people were very shocked that the British government people were suppressing harmless, innocent people that way, and the opposition started to build up within Britain, and ultimately Britain had to cook. Although Gandhi did not shoot a single bullet. Here in this case also, they started doing this thing, and in our Hindu culture, etc., you may do a lot of bad things to women, but you may not do it on public area. So when they went to train, the contractor dare not touch them or harm her, and etc. So contractor was sort of immobilized, paralyzed for 2 or 3 months, and by 2 or 3 months, more and more media started to cover the stuff, and finally it got to the idea of knowledge of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and she declared a moratorium or temporary stoppage for 50 days, and that became a final stoppage. So here's an example where you should love the trees, you should protect trees as a member of the family, and you don't need any education, no method, you need only passion stuff. So this is a thing. This is why I say that all of those things are necessary, and this is also necessary. Okay, so nowadays, I started my career as a forest officer long time ago by planting trees, teaching people how to plant trees, how to manage forests, etc. I take students out of Institute of Forestry in field trip, etc. But after I finish all the science and management, I said, because I invite them to hug the trees as love, because besides science and environment, loving is also important. And you can see all the ladies and people rushing to hug the trees. And you should remember that trees are source of succor, trees are source of doom. The whole climate change, which we hear nowadays, global warming due to fossil fuel. Where did the fossil fuel come from? The coal, the petrol. It came from trees like this. Tree farm, see? Tree farm in Nepal is called Unyu. And Unyu in Nepal, you are hardly 8 or 9 inches, but see, this tree is taller than me. And for educational purposes, this tree was brought to Botanical Garden. And these millions and millions of trees, which are 400 to 500 million years ago, got buried, and they were turned into fossil fuel. And it is the burning of the fossil fuel which are causing climate change. So here I am again trying to show my linkage to tree farm from millions and millions of years ago, and our human beings just 1 million years ago. Okay. Now, another major argument I'm trying to make here is that you can also win by losing also. Okay. So whenever you try to persuade people, persuade a politician, persuade government, persuade engineer, they never will get persuaded. But don't worry about that. When you are trying to persuade and you are losing the argument, the other people who are watching on the sides, they are getting pursued. So the more you try to fight there to win, you may not persuade the opponent, but you are winning more and more converts. So immediately after the Martin Chaudhary talk about 2 to 3 years ago, media came to interview, and I mentioned that the government was saying they are interested in development and airplanes, etc. But their main purpose is to make quick money from cutting down all of the trees, etc. Now, after Supreme Court made a decision, and after it was very clear that government had no idea where this trillions of rupees are coming, more and more people are agreeing that, yeah, government is only interested in making quick money and not building the airport at all. So again, this is the journey I started nearly 40 years ago at Dehradun, planting the forest trees. Now I see that forest trees are important, but forests have to be taken care of, and planting the love for forestry, not only love, but love for forestry. By forestry, I mean trees, nature, environment, all of, because they are not only useful to us, but they have a right to exist as well. So this is the end of my presentation. And like the people who are our environment, they thank the Supreme Court. I'm also thanking all of you. I urge all of you to plant trees, to hug trees, and to talk to people. If you don't understand, doesn't matter. Talk to your mothers, brothers, sisters, friends, neighbors, etc. And let's continue the movement, because we have won a major case, but the battle is not over. We still need help. So I will stop right here. I will entertain comments and questions from those who are who have some queries. Thank you, Saraswati.
Thank you, Professor Tuladar. It was a very informative talk on current issue of Nijgarh International Airport. So now I would like to move to a discussion session, and I can see some of the question over chat box. There is a first question from Garima Sharma. She said that sorry, you have mentioned that the EIA report was copied for Nijgarh Airport. Will you please discuss on how should we overcome this problem, because I think this problem is faced everywhere. And she also added, there are several efforts ongoing. What exactly should be other extra effort from our side that will help to convince government for this kind of intervention?
Okay, thank you. I couldn't get the name, but thank you for the good question. I think this is a question on the back of lots of people. We have to remember that EIA regulations were brought from Environment Protection Rules in 1997. And for 10 years, up to 1997 to 2007, only about 14 or 15 EIA was done after a long process. And the person who was in charge of EIA at Environment, Mr. Batuk Upreti, gave all the reasons of why EIA was such a cumbersome project, etc. But then all of those EIA were approved, and most of the people thought this was such a complicated place, didn't pay any attention. So whenever we see the government destroying the environment in cutting down trees also, we don't bother about the EIA as well. So one of the question is that in the case of Nijgarh, this was the biggest project and the most amount of trees were about to be cut. People get getting really excited, really passionate. So they started dig for EIA. So, and here I'm going to tell you something which may not be common knowledge. When we found out that EIA was faulty or copy paste, how did we find out? It was actually the EIA was done by an agency called GOOC, and in GOOC, the environment part or tree part was done by a forest officer, Dr. Ravinder Roy, and we had informal contacts with him. So we knew all about this trees being cut, etc. But we could not quote them because we didn't have an EIA at a public domain. So in order to get an EIA at public domain, which we could quote for legal cases, we had to ask the government. The government did not give us the EIA. It's supposed to be a public document. It did not give us. So what we did was we had to have another court case called Right to Information Act by Ms. Ranju Hazur Pandey, the lady in the picture. She put out a case and she fought the case. She won the case. And when the Supreme Court asked the Environment Ministry to give the EIA, only then we got the EIA copy, and then we could copy all the stuff that is wrong with EIA and bring it out into the open, including the Supreme Court. So vigilance is very important, and where government is very uncooperative, we might use to have a legal case to get those information as well. I think I answered your question.
Thank you, sir, for the answer, and thank you, Garimaji, for the question. There is another message for you from Sachin Kumar Singh. Can we connect with the BAN Chaudhary Viber group if possible? sending you message. Yeah,
So he or she wants to connect with PA and PAR. I think all of those agencies are easily available for internet, web pages, etc. If you do a Google search, you can make them. I do not have a personal phone number, but although I know Miss Shraddha Singh, etc. So I think you can look into Google, connect with them, and be involved in the activities as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, sir, for answering their queries. There is another question from Neva Chaudhary. As we all know, Nizgad is not appropriate to construct huge international airport, then what could be the other possible site for the airport so that the government could also be flexible?
Okay. Now, thank you for the question. We came up with several such sites, including the nearest site of Simra, Biratnagar, etc., as well as a site called Murtia area. Murtia area is only about 4 or 5 kilometers southwest of Nizgad area. And this area was cut down to make plantation for teak and sissu about 2 or 3 decades ago. So this was a very good area in terms of distance to Kathmandu, almost the same distance as Nizgad. One of the major arguments for Nizgad was that it has to be within 1 to 2 hours fast journey to Kathmandu. So fast track towards Nizgad was around 1.5 hours, 76 kilometers. So if you make in Murtia also, it will be the same distance. We came up with this argument, and the government would not listen. The aeronautical people would not listen, and they didn't really have a counter argument why this was not necessary. We came up with aeronautical argument saying that this was aeronautically also quite good. They won't listen, etc. And because they won't listen, we brought it over to Supreme Court, and they found that yes, this was a question. The Supreme Court judge did ask the people why Nizgad area and not in Murtia area. So they didn't have proper answer, and the government and the Supreme Court was not convinced. That is why we believe that people who are interested in Nizgad only to cut down trees to make a quick money rather than to build airport nearby. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for answering the question of Ms. Neva Chaudhary. If anybody have any question, you can please drop it in the chat box, or you can ask yourself by raising hand if you have any confusion or questions regarding today's talk program.
So may I say a few things?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So to all the participants who were here, thank you very much. I think there's a lot of information in social network like YouTube, internet, Facebook. I'm not aware of TikTok and Instagram, but there's a lot of information there as well. If you do a Google search, you'll find lots of information, and also get active with those activities as well. And you can also join Banku Chotari, etc., which is a Bible group, etc. So you talk to people, and sooner or later you'll get into group of people. As I said, we people of cities, well-educated people should be active, but ultimately we should talk to people who are not educated as well to convince them. And ultimately, all of these people will come in terms of vote. And you'll remember that in the coming elections in November, etc., an environmental expert, Dr. Arnika Pandey, is also standing up. So we could have more people who are environmental standing up in elections, as well as people who are at least friendly to the environment standing up, so that we can have environment. You must remember that we are not doing things for the environment, but we are actually, environment is part of our constitutional right for a healthy environment. And it was a long battle before we got that stuff. So I urge all of you to love environment, not only for the stuff we do first, but it is part of legal rights as well.
Thank you, Professor Tuladar, for your important message. If you have any queries, you can ask, or you can drop it in chat box. I think we have only this much question for today. So according to time, we are near at the end of the program. So I would like to give special thank to our guest speaker, Professor Amulya Ratna Tuladar, on behalf of Resources Himalaya Foundation and environmental graduates in Himalaya for accepting our invitation and providing us your valuable time for this very important informative session. And also I like to thank all the participants for being here and cooperating with us, with the hope that we'll meet again in our next talk program. I would like to thank everyone and end the session. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure and honor to speak with all of you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, sir. Thank you, everyone.